Hey everyone, this is Cameron from Renegade Animation on renegadepopculture.com. If you like what we do, please give us a like, a follow, and a rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to us. We are everywhere. Make sure to share out our episodes, and if you can, consider supporting our Patreon. That way we can keep doing what we love, and that's talking about the wild world of animation and animation strikes. And now, on with the show.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Renegade Animation on the Renegade Pop Culture Podcast Network. My name is Mike. I'll be your host for this evening. Joining me, as always, is the animation guru himself, Cameron.
Howdy, howdy.
And joining us for the first time in, I think, a year.
I guess.
We got Bree joining.
Hey, y'all.
Today's episode was inspired by I'm going to call it the first week of the Animation Guild and their negotiations with the AMPTP. So the goal...
AMPTP suck it.
Yeah. So the goal of this podcast is kind of twofold. One is to get everyone up to speed on, first of all, who the Animation Guild is, why what they're fighting for is important, and eventually we will get to what you guys, including us, can do to help the cause. Before we get to present day, we got to turn the clock way back to like 1938.
Are you telling me we have to turn it back time like Cher does?
Yes, exactly.
Now, we're going to start this with like, hey, I bet you want to know how we got here. Well, let's do it. And, well, let's start with Disney. So, they put out Snow White, huge, groundbreaking, culturally important to film history and just history in general movie.
It made a butt ton of money.
Indeed. Pinocchio and Fantasia afterwards, which, yes, are now considered Disney classics, died at the box office. They did horribly. So a lot of people like to whitewash the history of what are considered Disney classics, and we'll get to that when we talk about the early to mid-2000s bundle of animated films, because animation fans like to do that. They like to whitewash history as something like Disney put out nothing but bangers, and then they just lazily stop. No, that's not it. That's not what happened, buddy. So we get to 1941. After the failure of Fantasia and Pinocchio, Disney, Walt himself was like, we got to do something. We're about to lose all of our animators because they're going off to fight in a war, and we lost a lot of money on these two projects. So let's fire a few people. And one of probably Disney's best animator at the time fought back against that, saying like, hey, wait, whoa. Why is that our fault? And by the way, this guy's name is Art Babbitt. And essentially he was saying, why are you firing us? And then it's like the realization of, wait a minute, you are making upwards to $300 a week, while the rest of us are not getting all that while we're doing all of the work. And I mean, like, yes, Disney helped with some things. He's not like current CEOs where they absolutely do nothing. But at the time, there was just a lot of discussions about pay disputes and why, of course, the animators getting let go was important instead of, just doing what Satoru Iwata did with Nintendo back in the early 2010s, taking a pay cut to make sure to keep everyone on board. And on May 29th, like 3 days after Disney, who got kind of mad at Art Babbitt for speaking up against him, Abbott and a bunch of the Disney's animators went on strike, May 29th, 1941. And by the way, this is all on the Animation Guild's website. The strike lasted for 5 weeks. And let's just say a bunch of animators, even like after Disney folded to the union, which was brought to a close because the government came on board, and you really don't want to do that. You do not want the government to be like, to break up the fight like it's a 80s sitcom dad breaking up two siblings fighting. It's like, what's going on here? And essentially, Walt Disney lost. The animators got what they wanted. Some still left anyway, because it's like after Disney was being all like, I don't care about y'all. But still, the work improved. The animators got what they wanted. And it's good to know your worth. And those animators wanted to fight against a man who was not willing to pay them fairly to say, like, hey, start paying us or go on strike. Because at the time, and yes, you're making $300 a week doesn't sound like a lot, but this is 1941 money.
This is before inflation became what it is today.
And this was important. And to clear up some confusion, this was not during the time when Disney was making those anthology short film collections. That was after this, because now that they're all unionized, but oh, whoops, a lot of them got enlisted to fight for the war. So it's like, well, why are we going to do that?
Oh, by the way, just for those curious, $300 in today's money would be like close to $6,500 a week, which still by today's CEO standards isn't a lot, but for like animation industry standards, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This is why people go on strike. I mean, it's very obvious. People should know this, but apparently people think the workers, anytime that they go on strike in any industry, are being selfish. It's like,
but I want my video games and my cartoons. How dare you have livable working conditions?
We'll talk about that because that's an infuriating part about animation fandom. So
don't even get me started.
Yeah, I know. Seriously. We'll talk about that later, though. Like, what do y'all think about this? Because I don't think this was the first strike that happened in Hollywood, but it's like, for our sake, for the animation industry, this was extremely groundbreaking for it to happen and such.
Yeah, I would say for the case of our argument, this is like the book of Genesis for the modern animation industry, because animation, I mean, was still a thing. I mean, obviously you have like Warner Brothers, MGM, and then of course Disney in the mix, but like animation is like a film medium. There's some debate how much, Snow White was the quote unquote first animated film ever. For the sake of argument, it was the first color film with sound design that was commercially successful.
Because I know a lot of people will be like, well, what about that Prince Ahmed film? Like the one with the paper puppetry.
Yeah, most people don't know about that. And you know what? In all honesty, like, I don't even think that was like Walt Disney lying. Like, unless you were in those countries, I don't think people legitimately like knew about it back then.
That's probably fair. But for the general public, it's widely understood that like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is the movie that broke down a lot of doors in terms of what animation is capable of, at least if we're talking in the US.
Yeah, I mean, even though animation, still certain people assume that it's, lowbrow, blah, 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 insert whatever derogatory insult here. Cartoons before then were more of like a vaudeville sort of like sideshow entertainment. It wasn't really considered to be the main feature. It's just the stuff that you had like in between the newsreels or whatever.
I mean, like, let's not even get into the fact that like when the TV came to be, there was a lot of like, okay, well, so we'll put our theatrical shorts on TV and people can watch them that way. Oh boy, let's not get into that whole thing because of this. A lot of people were like, man, Disney shows used to look like this. And their point of reference is a short from the theatrical release of it. People do not understand that, no, animation did not look like that back in the beginning eras of TV. Those were theatrical shorts put on TV for broadcast. Everything mostly looked like the Rocky and Bullwinkle stuff.
And then like a few years later, like Hanna-Barbera.
Right, exactly. Like I said, animation fans have this weird whitewashing of history and just ignorance of what TV and theatrical animation looks like back then and now and all that stuff. So there were some other situations going on hand, like There's the Battle of Warner Brothers, which went on from 1946 to 1947. And then the Terrytoon strike in 1947. And unfortunately, like the Terrytoon strike did not do well. They did not reach a settlement until Paul Terry was essentially forced to sign it. I have to see when this was, because I'm sure this was, I was going to say this was around the same time as Mr. Bug Goes to Town, but that was once again in 1941. 1941, an important year for animation.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. So then we have to essentially jump forward in time 40 years because we are going to talk about the 1982 animation strike. Because once we jump from here to current day, a lot of what's wrong with the animation industry can be sourced from this one moment in time. So essentially what happened was during like the 60s and then up until 1982, there were talks of outsourcing animation jobs. So instead of having everyone and everything be done in-house, studios wanted to cut costs. So they would essentially send their shows and movies to be animated elsewhere. And that's when we start our lovely outsourcing situation. Yay. Anyway. And of course, a lot of animators were like, well, wait a minute. That means I won't have a job because your in-between animators are going to be from some horrible sweatshop or poorly put together studio across the ocean from us. And then they're like, yeah, what are you going to do about it? So everyone went on strike again because they wanted to keep the jobs in the US. So we didn't need to do outsourcing or what have you, because this was around the same time when like Hanna-Barbera and other companies were putting out so much stuff on TV. So they would, of course, send all of the work to be done like overseas in like South Korea, China, Thailand, the Philippines, Japan, and all that stuff. And unfortunately, after 10 weeks, and even some support from the likes of Don Bluth, whose film The Secret of Nim was coming out around the same time, showed support, the people striking unfortunately did not win anything. And unfortunately, that's where the snowball of effects starts to get bigger and badder as we get to this point. And that's just unfortunate because essentially what was going on was by the 10-week or so mark, the studios were still holding strong because this was, the Reaganomics era of capitalism and all that stuff. So they held strong. No longer were the artists in control. They were looking for people who could just get the job done and to cut costs, which it's an important year for the industry as a whole, but it's also like important in all the wrong reasons.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Like this is why people would go on strike, because they didn't want to lose their jobs. And unfortunately, a lot of them did. And that's why a lot of animation for decades, and even till now, have a lot of their animation done outside the US. This is why there's like the Studio Mir. This is why a lot of the good Batman the Animated Series episodes were done by TMS or what have you. There's a reason why in the credits you see everyone who worked on like the show here, like in the US, but then just like a smaller, not as detailed credit list for the animation was done by Studio Hot Dog or whatever the outsourced company was doing and such. This is also where like you can look at the other parts of the world, because even though there was the whole animation strike in 1941, in other parts of the world, other things were happening with animation that could be traced to a lot of bad decisions and corporate interests taking over to save money. Because like in Japan, when Osamu Tezuka was on the precipice of making anime doing groundbreaking work because this was right around the time when he broke up with Toei and he wanted to do high quality TV animation. And unfortunately, investors were like, I don't know, man. We would love to fund this, but well, we can't. This is going to cost a lot of money. And again, this is like 2/3 or even a third of a cost of what a US production would be. So it's already pretty small. So Tezuka was like, fine, we'll do this on half of the budget that we are told isn't possible. So investors said, hell yeah, that's a good deal then. And unfortunately, while we did get anime and all the stuff that comes with it, it also, like from that part of the world, set up a very bad precedent in the current not great crumbling anime industry landscape is right now. So once again, this is why people go on strike. So stuff like this doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And what do you all think about this? Like this time period of lights to fuse of what we're going into today, which we'll get to in a moment.
As far as like Tezuka's influence on animation in Japan, I kind of described it off air as he's a gift and a curse, because without him, the anime industry wouldn't have exploded the way it did. But because of the precedent he set, we now have
generational trauma of animators.
Yeah.
When people say like, well, this country's able to do that, why can't we?
The US has labor laws. That's how.
Yeah, exactly. And just because a country makes a movie, a show, or whatever on a third of the budget that we do, doesn't mean that the working conditions are great. And there's just entirely different cultural context to it all. Because like what we consider cheap, another country can consider it highly expensive. Like I remember someone saying like, well, if RRR could be made on like $60 million US dollars, why can't we do that? And it's just like, no, everyone had to tell that person, no, RRR is a tentpole production from India. This isn't an indie project. This is a huge deal. There's just so much with animation history because there's stuff that a lot of people ever think to understand or learn about, where other countries are way more supportive of the arts. There's a reason why so many amazing European animated films are made, but also are like co-productions between Finland, Belgium, France, Italy, Germany, is because a lot of them are made with government-driven art funds.
I might have a really hot, spicy take here. Mind if I share?
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I think a part of the reason is, and a lot of it is the fault of animation fans, but I'm going to be perfectly honest. I don't think it's 100% on them. I think a lot of the issue is two parts. One, the studio's obviously hiding the actual labor cost of animation and making it this, misty, kooky castle of like this shadow organization that is animation, like, ooh, it's, spooky, scary, like the Illuminati and Mickey Mouse or whatever bullshit. But the other part too is, and I've kind of noticed this a lot with animation organizations, especially like some of these accounts, like you could tell the difference of like who's running the main tag account and who's writing the tag writers account. I think a lot of the issue is that animation has been built into this mythos and there's not enough outreach to demystify it for like the general public. So then you have people saying idiotic things because there's no like conceptual understanding of like, no, like you don't get that this is like an organized business thing. Like there's certain things to do. You just can't walk in and say, I want to make a cartoon.
Yeah, no, exactly. There's a reason why, like, if you go to a theater and watch those compilations of like the Oscar nominated animated shorts and you see one like, oh, this was funded by the Canadian Art Fund, or like Australia does this a lot. The indie studio Glitch that does Murder Drones and The Amazing Digital Circus, that's how they get a lot of their funding. before obviously, the digital circus kicking into high gear and such. And unfortunately, we just don't have that. And so everything is at the beck and call of the executives pulling the strings, though, like in the US at least. Well, and just kind of everywhere in general. It's like, do you want to know why we don't get as many experimental stuff like we apparently used to and such? Well, there's this great video on YouTube that talks about the history of adult animation, and it shines a light on the fact that stuff like Fritz the Cat happened because it was anti-culture to make something like that compared to what Disney was making at the time, which was not its greatest lineup of stuff. But the reason why we got experimental stuff in the first place and why people like Ralph Bakshi came to power were because it was like, hey, we can get it done cheap and we can be wildly different. This is what also led to the Yellow Submarine and how that movie's impact basically kickstarted a bunch of careers of European animators because it's like, oh, we can do that now. That's popular. Okay, let's do that. And why one of the most important films in, I think it was Denmark's history, is this short 45-minute animated feature. And it's like there's this whole world of context that is missing from most animation fans' education as to why did this happen, but we don't do it now. Or it's like with the anime industry, for example, most of the things were for kids. And then because of outcries of this Astro Boy killing other robots, and people were being like, oh, well, that's most unorthodox. So then they just said, okay, fine. Creatives made their own genre to make sure they were explicitly for adults. And then that whole thing spawned shonen anime and all that stuff. And why we got stuff like the Anime Rama trilogy, which had these 3 highly experimental, partially erotic films from Tezuka that were very different than what anyone else was doing at the time. And they just cratered. They essentially cost Tezuka his own animation studio because of they were a little too different. So of course that leads to why studios were like, hey, wait a minute here. We can't be funding this stuff if we're not making money. So go back to the drawing board, make something that will make us money. And then maybe if you make us enough, we'll let you do your thing. And that can lead to its own thing of adult animation stuff and how MTV came to be with its adult animation lineup and all that jazz. It's way too much of a topic to discuss in this one episode because
that's not even getting into the OVA market in the 80s, which is the real start, I guess, of adult animation in Japan, at least on a more mainstream level.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly, because with then, they were dealing with censorship issues of what could you put on TV and what you couldn't. So because of the bubble economy that was going on, a bunch of studios were formed and say okay, you know what? We're going to make something. We're going to put direct to video and it's going to be amazing. It's going to be violent. It's going to be full of nude people in it. It's going to have sex and all that stuff. And then the bubble economy burst and a lot of those studios were not able to make their funding back. So, whoops. And then the 80s were just kind of the tail end of the creator-driven film economy, whether it's live action or animation, because they were heavily reliant on producers, which Paramount was like that during that time period until I think either 1990 or 1991 when Days of Thunder came out and died at the box office.
I think that was 1990.
And that's when then they were okay, maybe we need to start giving creatives control. Because yes, the animation and just film industry in general swings like a pendulum to both extremes. You have your 70s era where creatives got all the control. And then you got the 80s where the executives got more control. And then we're okay, let's get some creative people back in here, but let's put a leash on them. unless they make a bunch of money for us, and then we can loosen it up a little, as they say.
And I think you can actually tie that together. That's when people start to do less cocaine.
Oh, yeah. No.
Yeah, that tracks.
Yeah. So basically, nothing much changed after the 82 strike. And films were getting made. A lot of them were making so much money at the box office. Shows were getting very popular. We were starting to see a bloom in adult animation on TV. We were seeing more high quality stuff. But of course, a lot of those jobs were either in studio for specific reasons or outsourced. And then, of course, we get to the 2000s where CGI rises up. And here's the thing. A lot of animation fans love to say films like...
I know what you're going to say.
Yeah, Atlantis, The Road to El Dorado, Sinbad, and Treasure Planet were hits. They were not.
Nope. Not even close.
They were absurdly expensive for what they were and died on the vine because, honestly, the public's lack of interest in them.
I think something like Treasure Planet's a little bit more complicated and still one of the funniest bits. I remember from Lindsay Ellis's Hercules episode about Treasure Planet being dumb, which, Treasure Planet fans will want to say this, but Treasure Planet, like I saw it, it's fine. It's pretty. I'll give you that. But I'm like, this is no movie that was going to be doing Lion King numbers. Let's be real. And the reason I feel like Treasure Planet kind of bombed the way they did is because the studio lost faith too. And then with the rise of CG, because I think it's a more complicated issue than people are realizing, which speaking of CG, every time I hear an animation fan say this, I want to drop kick them. They all went to CG because CG is cheaper than 2D animation. I'm like, no, it isn't. Shut the
CGI, especially back then, was not cheap. The only reason it doesn't look as good now is because time has passed, technology has improved, and now we can make it look amazing. Back then, Toy Story was the pinnacle of CGI animation, alongside other films like Ants and to a maybe slightly lesser extent, but still same level, the Jimmy Neutron movie. That was expensive stuff back then. And to say that CGI was cheaper is horrifically false. Yes, there's just a lot to those movies bombing, and some of it could be attributed to the fact that Disney was lacking the commitment to go full dark mode with stuff like Atlantis and Treasure Planet, because I'll say this, Treasure Planet can be really good for about 50% of the movie. The other 50% is not. Same with Atlantis. There's half a good movie in there that was squandered because they couldn't commit to the bit or the tone of it being more adult. And interests change. DreamWorks was not pumping out a lot of money making 2D animated films. When Shrek came out, and then Pixar was doing their thing, which were offering new or interesting ideas at the time, everyone was like, well, I want that stuff. I don't want this 2D stuff. And of course, this was also during a time when Michael Eisner was in charge and saying, hey, let's make a bunch of direct-to-video 2D animated features. Those things made a lot of money, even if 80% of them were not very good.
And here's the thing, too, because I've actually talked to guys who work there. And what a lot of people don't understand, it's honestly almost kind of unforgivable. People were cheering when John Lasseter shut down Disney 2 and direct-to-video stuff. Because while theatrical animation is down, the direct-to-video stuff was keeping so many people employed.
Exactly. And half of those movies look pretty okay.
Most of stuff from the 2000s onward, they got significantly better than the stuff from the mid to late 90s.
Well, I think a lot of the issue too is a lot of the 90s ones were either hidden TV pilots or rejected pilots, so they're for foreign outsourced studios, versus the stuff made by Disney Toon, which is, I believe, had satellite studios in Paris and Australia. I think some of Disney MGM might have done some work on them too in between.
A lot of these actions are because of the 2 strikes. It's like some things were able to be kept in-house, but because of the 80s stuff, everything started to get outsourced or were put into different studios. Like during the 2010s, Warner Brothers technically didn't make any of their animated movies in-house. A lot of them were made by Animal Logic or Sony Pictures Animation, like the Montreal studio and such, which is why DreamWorks is now doing that, right? With making a contract with Sony Pictures Montreal so they can avoid dealing with unions. And golly, like in the modern day right now, there are so many stories of creatives going out of their way to screw over animators because they didn't want to deal with the union. It's like you wouldn't have to deal with the union if you bloody unionized.
Exactly.
It's amazing how this keeps happening, where the studios are like, or creatives are like, I don't want to deal with the unions. Nothing bad's going to happen from that. And then something bad happens. And they're just like, who could have seen this coming?
And that's not even animation exclusive things. My dad's like a teacher and he was like co-head of the union or like head of the union or whatever. So many people are like, if it doesn't affect me, like, then I'm not do anything. And this is why like the union movement overall just needs a good kick in the ass, because most people just don't know how to unionize. Like just joining a union doesn't, mean that you're abdicated from like any responsibility to actually like maintain the union.
Yeah, let's talk about some modern things that are going on, like stuff like now disgraced creator of Rick and Morty, Justin Roiland, went so far out of the way to make shell companies to avoid dealing with the unions. It's amazing how much work he put into not wanting to deal with them. And it's really freaking gross on top of all the terrible things about that guy.
In case you haven't noticed, at the end of the credits of the various Rick and Morty seasons, you'll notice there'll be logos for companies you have never heard of until Rick and Morty, because those were just shell companies created by Roiland and probably Dan Harmon.
Roiland's the one who just was a complete utter monster. So while Dan Harmon did have his own little things that were not great, he's gotten better about that. But here,
Dan Harmon's just kind of weird.
Yeah, no, exactly. A lot of stuff like this is now happening, and because of like the current stuff that's going on right now, where studios are absolutely trying to avoid dealing with unions again, even though we just went on a bloody strike a year ago and not greenlighting anything. They're canceling things left and right, and people are just not getting work. And it's scary because these studios are so petty and full of people like Jeffrey Katzenberg, who are just like, we'll just replace you with AI. Or we just won't greenlight things and we'll write your movie off as a tax write-off, baby, because I need that 6th yacht and nothing we're making is giving me money to buy that yacht. I mean, it's more complicated than that.
Also, we need to have the orcas on speed dial.
I know we do. Give them the ability to breathe on land also, so we can have our own walking orca army. Anyway, one of the things that has led to the current situation is the rise, and I'll be blunt, immense stagnation of animation fans' favorite thing to preach, indie animation, where a bunch of smaller teams are making indie animated pilots to be popular enough to make series and to avoid the grasp of studios, which, listen, I get it. After these last few years and just how terrible companies like Netflix and Warner Brothers and Disney have been to their creatives, Warner Brothers and Sony with Genndy Tartakovsky's Fixed, like, okay, so Warner Brothers isn't going to distribute it anymore for some reason. Sony, why don't you just put it out? Until we hear otherwise, it just sounds like Sony's like, I don't know, can't we? And it's like, Y'all made the movie. Jesus.
That one confuses me the most because, first of all, I'm not really even sure why they made a deal with New Line Cinema if they were just going to chicken out and not release the movie. Well, actually, no. I think one reason probably has to do with the merger and leadership just changing over like throughout the production of that film. But Sony has a good relationship with Kenny Tartakovsky with how much money the Hotel Transylvania series has raked in. So I don't really understand why they are not willing to put out the movie themselves.
Well, my hope is that they reignite their deal with Netflix, which seems, from what I understand, to have worked really well. My only thing is that it's a contractual thing, and like it's going to be basically in like jail for like contractual reasons for a certain amount of time. And then I just kind of want to like backtrack like just a little bit. Let's just talk about, lover, hater. I'm sorry, she is a trailblazer, like Vivian Medrano. And that's like usually the go-to, like, oh, Husband Hotel, hell of a boss. I'm like, y'all know that she had like 3 like failed pilots before this. And she had built like an audience like over a decade. Like she didn't just come out of the woodwork saying, I'm going to make the internet's favorite / most hated cartoon.
Yeah, so let's talk about this indie side of things. First off, it's not viable. I made an editorial literally talking about this, saying it is not the savior of the animation industry. It is nigh impossible. Just because Has-Been Hotel and Hell of a Boss did well, just because Lackadaisy did, just because The Amazing Digital Circus did like freaking heckin' bonkers, like profits and views, does not mean it's the future. Animation costs a lot of money, especially with all of the weird, perfectionist, demanding animation that you all want, apparently, from an indie studio to put out a pilot with Studio Ghibli level animation. It's not possible. It's expensive. You have to pay people to do that. That's why people join unions and are fighting for better wages. And just because 3 shows did well does not mean like it's the future. So many indie shows that are on right now are only going to be stuck as pilots because it's way too expensive. That one that Mike and I talked about, Port by the Sea, it's stuck as a pilot.
Mm-hmm.
And so many of them do not get the traction and views that something like Hell of a Boss, Has Been, and Digital Circus gets. One of my favorites, Monkey Wrench, gets a fraction of the success. And they're having to do their upcoming episode with more animatic animation until they are able to, like, sprinkle in completely fluid animation. This is why TV animation looked so wonky for the longest time, because the budgets weren't there. That's why everything from Hanna-Barbera has like one walking or run cycle. That's why Scooby-Doo looked like how it did. It's easy to just say go indie when you don't understand the stress and buildup of having to do that. Especially since, I'm sorry to the fan, like to blame the fans on this because it's not all them. The fans are not supporting indie animation. Hell, they're barely supporting 2D animation when we get it in theaters.
That's something that kind of bugs me, how people claim they want 2D animation on the big screen, but
they don't show up.
Yeah.
Unless it's Ghibli, they don't show up.
Like someone who Mike and I follow on Twitter was asking, do these animation fans and do the influencers on Twitter and YouTube actually go out to support the non-US made 2D animated films that are coming out? No, they don't. It is like pulling teeth to make YouTubers and influencers in the animation space support anything. It's like you have to force them to talk about stuff like that.
Hold their hands, caress them, saying it will be all right.
yeah, it'll be all right. I'm sorry it's not a Disney 2D feature, but you wanted 2D animation in theaters, so you have to go do that. And of course, there's arguments and stuff like, gee, kids only putting the films out like Sirocco and the Kingdom of the Wind for 2 days. And like, that sucks, but they're doing it. They're still releasing the movie. And a lot of y'all won't go see non-US animated features from other parts of the world that aren't Japan. And even then, you don't show up to the ones from Japan unless it's like a Makoto Shinkai or Hosoda or Miyazaki.
Right.
Thing, or if it's attached to a big franchise.
Yeah, like a big shonen franchise. But in terms of that, like, let's just do, for instance, if I ask the average animation fan what Triplets of Belleville is, they won't know.
That's a great movie, by the way.
Everyone
should watch that.
Favorite. I haven't watched it in years. I really need to rewatch it.
It needs a Criterion release because the Blu-ray release was botched. So
that's unfortunate.
So it's like, so anyway, this is my point. If animation fans are not supporting anything else that's not made by Disney or the bigger companies, how are you supposed to expect 2D animation to thrive? And how are you expecting indie animation to thrive when you won't show up, when no other series can get the amazing digital circus numbers?
And you know what I think part of it is that I know this is going to sound bad, but I feel like a lot of people assume indie animation is synonymous with YouTube and free animation, that it's free, and you don't have to go like hoops through, Anime Pirate Site XYZ and possibly infect your computer because it's right there on YouTube and you can watch it anywhere. It's free, high quality entertainment. So then I feel like it sets this precedent saying, oh, if I'm just watching it on YouTube, I'm supporting it. And no, that's not how that works. Do you have any idea like what ad revenue on YouTube actually is like?
It's pennies.
It is not viable to make a living off of YouTube income.
Why do you think pretty much every indie animated creator has a merch store, a Patreon, a Kickstarter? Like, they have to go through all the hoops just to have enough funding for one episode or one pilot.
Again, these things cost money. And unfortunately, one of those pillars of indie animation is no longer indie. Like, Hell of a Boss is no longer independent productions because not only is she paying union wages to get people, who's the guy from What We Do in the Shadows who was also in Puss in Boots: The Last Wish? Harvey Gillum?
Yes.
Like, he's going to be in Hell of a Boss. It's like, well, where's that money coming from? And, well, Hell of a Boss is no longer indie because they are now outsourcing their animation to places outside the US.
And also, lest we forget, Hazbin Hotel is A, streaming on Prime Video, and B, now it's like a huge smash hit for the streamers. So
NA24.
NA24. So
yeah, and Bento Box. So
I guess you could say that Hazbin Hotel has become the Green Day of the indie animation scene.
That's accurate. Listen, I know a lot of YouTubers were very enthusiastic because they get so excited and stuff about indie animation because it's like there's so much creativity and such. And it's like, y'all aren't supporting the really cool stuff coming out from studios like Scavenger's Reign, Fired from Mars, Carol and the End of the World. It's amazing how hypocritical y'all are. And then when told indie animation is not viable, they just like turn their noses up like and close off their ears like, I'm not listening. And for some reason, none of these animation YouTubers who talk about this stuff and narrating indie as the future, they are dead silent about the current animation negotiations right now with the Guild and AMPTP. Yeah,
I mess that up all the time too.
Why the hell are y'all so quiet about this? Are you mad that you could have a possible delay in shows and movies that you might want to make YouTube videos off of? Is that why? Why don't you all talk about this stuff? Rarely can I find people who are part of this animation community who are willing to talk about this stuff. They really don't want to talk about it. And they just want to live in their own dome of ignorance of like, well, it's the studio's fault. So la, 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 that solves everything. Just go indie, do YouTube stuff. And it's like, no, if you want indie animation to thrive, you have to fix the main industry. You have to fix all the stuff that's going on with DreamWorks, Disney, Sony, Universal, everything in the main industry. When you can do that, when people start earning good wages, they stop outsourcing their jobs and they stop canceling everything left and right after 12 seconds, then maybe those people who make the future, quote unquote, of animation can work on something like an indie pilot or something. But unfortunately, we're nowhere near that right now. The animation industry is in shambles. That's where we are right now.
Yeah, the way it's kind of being described by people who, I guess, don't really understand just how bad the industry is right now. The theoretical concept of indie animation kind of feels, well, just that. It just feels utopian. Like they're running away from the industry instead of fixing what's right in front of us.
I just think they don't care. Like, I don't think they care as much as they think they do.
It's kind of like a two-sided coin, because I feel like a lot of the issue is like on the opposite end of the spectrum. A lot of it is throwing out the baby with the bathwater, saying, well, it's broken, just fucking throw it all away. And I'm like, no.
We got to fix everything that's happening right now. So instead of running away from it, show your support, watch the shows, because I saw a few stupid people on Twitter being like, and this is why I won't support corporate studios. Slop. I'm all indie, baby. And it's like, okay, well, you see how that's bad, right? That makes it worse. Because if you don't show your support, then cool stuff like Scavenger's Reign cannot be made. You want to see stuff like BoJack Horseman? Well, you have to support stuff like that. You wanted to see Tuca and Birdie keep going? Well, you had to support it, and instead you didn't. And if you want to see indie animation be fruitful as an alternative, make sure these negotiations go well. Make sure that you support the animators that are fighting for their lives right now. Yeah, let's talk about it. Mike, what can people do? And like, what should we do to show our support? Because the current negotiations didn't go well, so they're going to pick it all back up in September. I think mid-September is what they said.
Yeah, something like that.
And to be clear, they couldn't just go on strike instantly. That's another thing. A lot of people are like, y'all deserve to lose your jobs because you didn't go on strike the moment.
First of all, no, I mean, strike is like a last resort. I mean, I don't know why people can't get this concept. I mean, and they already kind of did like a mini walkout with like the rally that happened like a few days ago. So I'm like, they know, like they're aware. It's just the AMTP. I can't even say it. They don't care.
They want to reduce costs by any means necessary. And that means getting rid of the human heart of that goes into animation. You can't get this stuff with generative AI. It's just not possible. And we've seen how bad low budget affairs can be, like how shows can end up as they are because of the low wages and bad production pipelines and budgets and such.
To answer your question of what can we do to support the Animation Guild, first of all, make a lot of noise on social media. Anytime you tweet something out with the hashtag #StandWithAnimation, that gives people in the guild more visibility and just more moral support. The more support behind the people in the guild, like the more negotiating power they will have.
That's what needs to happen. And to be clear, going on strike isn't just like, well, the deal didn't go through. I'm whipping out my picket fence, a sign, and walking outside. It's not like that. You have to go through levels.
I know. Tell me you have never had a job without saying that you've never had a job.
It's like going on strike is one of the most bureaucratic things you have to do. A majority of people have to sign off on that to agree to go on strike. It's not as easy as just walking outside and being like, well, time to go on strike. You got to listen to these people, listen to the animators, listen to the actual guild and folks that work in the industry about what to do. Don't listen to some random YouTuber or influencer or Twitter twit who has no idea how the industry works. Don't listen to them. There are animators who are talking right now who are saying, like, follow these profiles and these accounts, and you can get information about what you can do when or if we do go on strike.
And one more thing, because this is actually pretty important. I would steer clear of any of the major trades like Variety or The Hollywood Reporter or Deadline.
Yeah.
Because A, those are controlled by Pence Media, which is heavily affiliated with the AMPTP. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to control the narrative. They're trying to...
Good old-fashioned rat fucking.
Yeah. They want to sow dissent and divide all of the guilds, and we cannot let that happen.
I mean, this happened last year with the writers and actors strike. They were literally like one day posting mere minutes away from each other. We're posting articles bashing the studios, only to then post something that would make the strikers look like the bad guys. And it's like, no, that's not how that works. You guys are scummy as hell. They are willing to lie about the current situation to make their overlords look better. And you just can't let that be. Do not fall for it. Do not be manipulated into falling for these propaganda pieces. That's what they are. Again, that's how we got here. People in 1941, they wanted better wages. Walt Disney said no. They went on strike. They got what they wanted. Walt Disney said, screw you, I'm going to Latin America. And then I'll start my new good neighbor policy with a few of our films, which that's a whole other thing to talk about that we don't have time to. 1982, they tried to, animators and artists and writers tried to stop outsourcing. That failed. Studios got their way. If you let studios get their way now, that they're already trying to weasel and worm their way into still getting what they want now with the writers and actors, say goodbye to years of productivity, creativity, and seeing essentially no creative art from the people that actually make the stuff. The studios deserve nothing. The artists and everyone that makes the stuff for the studio deserve everything.
Because, here's the thing, too. When it inevitably comes out, when generative AI, the AI bubble pops, which I'm going to be real, that's going to happen a lot sooner than people think. Because here's the thing. Let's just say, in theory, that it goes through, we replace everyone with AI. Then when they inevitably realize, oh, shit, this doesn't do magic things. This actually costs more money to run. It's going to take years to unfuck all this.
It's going to take a while. And, if you want to see more creative stuff, you need to be on the artist side of all things. I mean, that should be obvious, but a lot of people aren't for some odd reason. It's so weird. And I assume a lot of these uneducated people on Twitter are teenagers, so they just
I think a good portion of them are.
YouTube all day. Mm-hmm. I mean, this sounds like such a boomer thing. I'm sorry, but it's do not listen to influencers. They don't know what they're talking about. Trust the artists, man. It's not that hard. Trust the artists. Make sure they get the help that they need for this. Even if you have to donate $20, if they do that thing what Adam Conover set up during the strike from last year, giving them a little money to help them while they're on strike, that helps. And just be on the lookout for that.
as we kind of alluded to, a lot of people in the animation industry have been laid off for quite some time. Some probably even close
well
to
over a year.
Yeah. So
like a year and a half or so. It's not great out there right now. And this is why, again, this is why people go on strike. Their means of making a living is no longer able to make a living. That needs to change. And it might not affect you, but it's not going to be pretty when it does. Just listen to the Animation Guild, listen to animators, and we'll see what happens in September. If they go on strike, well, you'll hear from what we'll be doing until then. So,
I mean, I'm really hoping that they avoid it and don't make the same pitfalls of 2022. But here's the thing about labor movements. I feel like a lot of people need to be on the same page. And for better or worse, I feel like in the current conditions that we are, it's more on the worse side. I feel like a lot of leadership of these labor unions, they're under the impression that the studios are going to argue in good faith. And that's obviously like a rash of bullshit. The comparison I come up with in my mind is, during the 2016 election saying when we go high, that's a nice idea in theory. That doesn't work like that in real life.
Nope.
No, so it's like, I know we're being very adamant and kind of grumpy about this. I guess one of the few times you'll get Cranky Cam out of this. It's because I love what these people do. They are some of the hardest working people out there. Art is only going to be made by artists, and great art can only get made when they are able to work in an industry that allows that. And I know this is like more of a homework episode because, we gave you a cliff noted history lesson of what happened and what we're talking about now, but not everything we're going to talk about on this podcast is going to be fun and games. I would love to talk about new shows and movies here and around the world and such, but like you have to take the bitter with the sweet. So
exactly.
It'll just mean everything will be better because if the negotiations go well, they get what they want, we'll get better movies and better shows and better working conditions for the people that make them. So,
2 more points I want to make before we wrap this up. One, just to demonstrate how bad things are in the industry, not just in animation, but in general. I saw something on Twitter where James Gunn was explaining to a fan why his Superman movie has like wrapped principal photography a year before its release in theaters. And one of the things he talked about was like the reason why he did that is because A, he doesn't shoot anything until he has a finished script to work from, but also he wants to give the VFX crew and everyone in post-production as much time to get the movie looking as good as possible. That shouldn't be refreshing.
No, that should be the norm.
Exactly. Like the industry is so bad right now that basic human decency is treated like you just cured cancer.
Yeah, it's amazing how it's now the exception to the norm instead of being the norm, which is
And one more thing, for those who weren't able to attend the Animation Guild rally in person, Adam Conover just at the day we recorded this a few hours ago put out a little video of him basically saying, don't wait for the studios to give you respect. Your work is already making them boatloads of money at the box office and on streaming services. Remind them of that and you will win.
Golly, I'm so glad we have people like Adam Conover saying
awesome.
The quiet part out loud. Like, we need more people like him. So that's really it. I'm exhausted. This really wound me up a little because I've just had a lot of nonsense to deal with in the last few days of animation fans just not getting the program.
Ready to light up that cigarette, like that one picture of Miyazaki with his hands on his head.
I don't smoke, but yes, that mood, that tone of just like animation.
The metaphorical cigarette.
Yeah, the metaphorical cigarette, exactly. Animation fandom was a mistake.
Fandom anything was a mistake.
Support the unions, support the Animation Guild with whatever happens.
Yes, support TAG. Like, I didn't say this at the start of the show, but TAG has a lot of great people in it, even if leadership sometimes does things that don't always make logical sense. I actually did a beautiful portfolio review the other day that really helped. They do free portfolios every year. Usually signups are around June. They happen in August. They have a lot of outreach to try to be like inclusive. Honestly, like, they're a great bunch of people. I know several people in tags. I know several people in the industry, and really they're an awesome group of people that y'all really need to support.
Exactly. So show your support when whatever happens. And that's really it for this episode. So
next time we will be covering the Summer Anime 2024. As far as this topic goes, well, you'll hear from us again probably in September. But until then, Bree, where can everyone find you online?
Most places. I'm at Crazy Lemur. I am a regular on Zeroing Out. We usually stream either Tuesdays or Wednesdays bi-weekly. Mike is also a co-host on that, so definitely check that out. And I'm doing rating and animation editing things. So when I have stuff to show, I'll show it.
And Cameron, where can everyone find you?
You can find me on Twitter and Blue Sky and Instagram at Cam's Eye View. I have my own website called camseyeview.biz where I review films and shows from around the world called The Other Side of Animation. I have a Patreon at patreon.com/camseyeview. That's where you can find me.
And you guys can find me on various social media sites at Captain K42. You can check out my quick thoughts on letterboxd.com/Coach K42. And you can follow Renegade Pop Culture on Facebook and that place at Ren Pop Culture. You can also find us on YouTube, on Podchaser. Consider supporting our Patreon at patreon.com/Renegade Pop Culture. Let's do all of our podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. And last but not least, everything can be found at renegadepopculture.com. You can escape, so do we. That'll do it for this episode of Renegade Animation. We will catch you guys later. Peace out.